All right, man, peace. Yo, brothers, watch for this Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler storyline to become a major situation, particularly on the part of Karl Anthony Towns, if this entire situation is not rectified ASAP. Because as has already been revealed last season, especially in the playoffs, Karl Anthony Towns is kind of fragile mentally. And I believe that he believes that the Minnesota Timberwolves utilized a little chicanery with him, that Tom Thibodeau was deceptive with him. I say that because it's very clear that the main reason why Karl Anthony Towns eventually signed the extension to remain a Minnesota Timberwolf was based on the condition that the Minnesota Timberwolves were going to comply with Jimmy Butler's request to be traded. Well, clearly, Tom Thibodeau is out to save his own ass. I've stated this numerous times that it's very obvious that Tom Thibodeau understands that his fate, his future with the Minnesota Timberwolves is directly correlated with him making sure that this Jimmy Butler strategy works. When I say Jimmy Butler strategy, meaning he brought Jimmy Butler in to be the leader of this team and to try to lead this team. And it's very obvious that Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns, and Andrew Wiggins were all clashing with one another, particularly Jimmy Butler against Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. Both of the young dogs wanted him out. After a while, he wanted to be out because he realized that he was not going to be paid commensurate with what they were getting paid. And this whole situation started to blow up. Now what Tom Thibodeau is hoping is that he can smother out this fire, get Jimmy Butler to stay, and force these three guys to play together. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
The Timberwolves lost their season opener to the Spurs, but what was really notable was that
once again, as I've stated, watch out for the Spurs. They're a dark horse for me in the Western Conference. When I say a dark horse, it would not surprise me if they make the playoffs and they win their first round matchup. It would not shock me.
Was that Karl Anthony Towns, he had a rough night. 8 points, 2 of 6 shooting, fouled out guys after only playing 22 minutes. Chance, how much do you think all the drama in Minnesota the last week or two has affected Cat?
Rich, I think it's definitely had an impact.
It's obvious that it's had an impact. You could tell even by how he was responding to many of the questions that the reporters were asking him when they were questioning him about Jimmy Butler, that he was extremely uncomfortable. And beyond that, if you're very perceptive, you could read in his facial expressions that he feels like he's being put in a position that he was promised he was not going to be put in. I'm sure that Minnesota told him that you're the future. We want you to lead the team. You're going to be the captain. And as soon as Jimmy Butler walked into that first practice and started raising hell, Karl Anthony Towns, I'm sure, was like, what the hell is going on here? I was told certain things, but it's too late now because he's already put pen to paper.
We all have had subpar games. What I look at on his stat sheet is 2 for 6. Mm-hmm. Not that he had just had 8, just 2 for 6. He really wasn't trying to go out there and get it. And I think there's like a black cloud over the team, the organization right now. And that was what I always said I would worry about. Not Jimmy, not Tibbs, because Jimmy won't be there long.
Well, presumably he won't be there long. Presumably. I believe that Jimmy Butler has been told that this first month or so of the season, if he plays hard, that's going to raise his trade value. I don't see how that's really going to help because it's very obvious that Tom Thibodeau is asking for too much. Once again, Tom Thibodeau knows that he needs Jimmy Butler to stay because I don't believe that there are any other teams that are going to be willing to trade for Jimmy Butler to the degree where the Minnesota Timberwolves will receive equal value for letting him go. So this entire situation is pretty much FUBAR.
These guys will be there long term,
right.
And what's been impacted with the relationship with these guys?
Listen, man, this is what I think Jamie has been talking about. You know, you get paid max dollars this offseason. You know, you struggled in your first playoff series. We were talking about your lack of motivation or assertiveness on the offensive end, defensive end. This is what we were talking about in the playoffs. And then you get paid this offseason in your first night, you take 6 shots.
Right.
You are way too talented to have this type of debut.
Let me say this very quickly. Karl Anthony Towns' toughness is going to be tested, not just out there on the basketball court, but in the locker room. Jimmy Butler is a lot like Kobe Bryant. He wants Karl Anthony Towns to come into the locker room and punch him in his face and say, give me the fucking ball when I call for it. That's the cloth that Jimmy Butler is cut from. And I just don't think that Karl Anthony Towns is ever going to come to terms with having a mentality like that, where he's calling for the ball and he gets upset when he does not get it.
After all this stuff that we've been talking about, all this drama,
right,
you cannot come out with this type of performance.
And beyond that, right now, he's in a rough situation because Jimmy Butler has cast him as a player who plays for stats. So now Karl Anthony Towns is like, if I call for the ball and I demand it, people are going to claim that I just want my numbers. But if I just go along with the flow, then people are going to claim that I'm soft. It is what it is.
Performance, because now it's making Jimmy like, everybody's looking at Jimmy like, oh, there's the truth to that. Like, come on, Cat. He's too talented for this.
I mean, to me, this I kind of agree with Chance. This is putting Cat in a little bit of an unfair position. And this is on tip.
It's putting him in a very unfair position. That's why I state, watch for Karl Anthony Towns to possibly have a mental breakdown if Jimmy Butler is not removed soon enough. Now, we're also going to get the opportunity to learn a lot about Jimmy Butler. Does he look at Karl Anthony Towns and say, let me feed this young boy so that he can get his numbers and he can help us win? Or does Jimmy Butler say, I have to take the bull by the horns and make sure that I show out and lead this team to victories so that hopefully another team will trade for me?
Tibbs, really, because look, Jimmy has said that 4 days after their season ended last year, he came and told Tibbs, I want out, right? And then he told them again and again over the summer, and then they had that in-person meeting in California where Tibbs tried to come in and like convince him differently, and he told him again,
y'all are
I
not
want
about
a
to
trade,
put this on
right?
Tibbs.
Well, no, but here's the thing.
Well, you have to put it on Tibbs, Tracy McGrady, because at the end of the day, number one, Jimmy Butler demanded a trade from Tibbs. Allegedly, Tibbs agreed. Number two, it's very clear, as I've already stated, that the main reason why Karl Anthony Towns signed the extension is because he was most likely promised by Tom Thibodeau that Jimmy Butler was going to be traded. So basically, he's been disingenuous to two different players.
Thing. Tibbs said, no, I don't want to trade him. I think I can get Jimmy back in and this can work and I can force him to stay.
Right, but who has he told that to? He didn't tell that to Jimmy Butler, at least not outright. And he damn sure, I promise you, he did not tell that to Karl Anthony Towns, because I promise you that the only reason why Karl Anthony Towns signed the extension is because he thought that Jimmy Butler would be gone.
We all thought, hey, how does that affect Jimmy? Is Jimmy really going to want to do that? And obviously he took a while, but then eventually came back in. We weren't focusing as much on how it would affect Cat. Tibbs making that decision and said, no, I can force him to stay.
Yes, he didn't come to that conclusion until probably about a week or so ago. That's when Tibbs said, you know what, I think I can force him to stay. That's when Jimmy Butler said, okay, I'm going to raise you, and I'm just going to go ham in practice.
How would that affect Cat?
And I'm going to sit down with Rachel Nichols and talk crazy.
I get all that. I get all that. Despite what you're saying, he still is a professional and has a job to do.
Jimmy?
No, Cat.
Sure.
He got paid max dollars.
Right.
I don't care what Tibbs is trying to do. I don't care what your relationship with Jimmy or Tibbs. You got a job to do.
Right.
It's just...
Right, but T-Mac, you also have to remember he's a big man. He does not get to bring the ball up. As a matter of fact, as the big man, oftentimes he's the last person to touch the basketball in an offensive possession. So what he needs to do is to no longer care what people think about him and let Jimmy Butler know that he needs his touches. So he's going to have to actually play into the narrative that Jimmy Butler has created for him, that he's a me-first player only going after his stats. And he's going to have to be more communicative with the public at large and say, look, I'm not just going after numbers. I want to be a part of this franchise's success. I need touches. And what is Jimmy Butler really going to be able to do or say after that? He can persist in that narrative if he wants to, but all he's going to make himself do is look more like a malcontent. So it's up to Karl Anthony Towns to step up and be a man.
It's that simple. You got to leave all that stuff off the basketball court and go out and compete. That's just that simple.
Well, they play in Minnesota tomorrow night, so we will see how that goes. First time with that team taking the floor in front of the home crowd.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. But once again, this Karl Anthony Towns situation is something to watch. So peace.